Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It's time to continue my discussion on D20 Modern, the modern take on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Where we left off, I was diving into the basics of game mastering that you're going to need to know about. Let's continue where I left off, because this is important stuff, talking about the game mastering that you're going to be doing. The first question most characters are going to ask is, what do I see? It is the classic one that is going to be setting up pretty much every scene you're going to have. What do I see? What does the player see? And it's up to you to basically establish and answer their questions appropriately. You're going to want to fill them with important details that they're going to need to know about the scene without being too detailed. Effectively, you want to provide them with a list of information that's going to lead to the next question and help develop this interaction between you and especially between the characters in the scene itself. You're going to tell them something and they're going to be like, oh, this is my question related to what you told me. And then you answer that. And that might lead to another question. And you're effectively engaging them in the scene and exciting them, getting them involved with what is going on. And that is the point of it, the point of these sort of questions back and forth. The point is to engage them in it. And you're going to use details that aren't just visual details. You want to engage all of their senses as much as possible. That they might be listening, hearing, smelling things, that they might notice certain things that are going to be important to them. But again, keep them important details to a degree. You probably want a little bit of stuff to help set up things, but all of it should relate to the mannerism of the setup. Maybe if there's a bad smell there should be a good reason behind it that they're going to notice. You know, if it's a machine shop and you might smell oil, well, of course that makes sense that they might smell that. You'll tell them that. Then they might know, oh, maybe we can get a machine here or a tool here that could be useful later on when doing something in the scene. Effectively, the player's questions in the scene should help you set up the next scene. It should lead them to the next logical step in the scene. Basically, the scenes should flow from one another and keep up to a point in time to keep up the excitement. And players can get off track. They could go in a different direction that you're entirely not expecting. If that happens, you effectively have to get them back on track. You have to give them suggestions to lead them in the proper area, or alter what's going on to give them hints that, like, oh, why they go to a different location than they should have. There's a hint that you really should have gone to that other location to begin with. You have to do it subtly, too. You subtly influence them. In the same retrospect, they might not know the correct questions when they're in the scene. You're going to have to give them hints, but you don't want to directly interfere. What you should do is you should call for things like spot checks, listen checks, search checks, something like that, that once they complete it, you give them another hint. You might say like, oh, there seems to be something off about that shelf over there. It looks like it was moved at one point in time. Maybe the point of it was they should have searched the shelf and find an item on there that leads them to the next location. They weren't looking over there. You've effectively set up that them looking around has noticed the proper thing to take them in the right direction. So each scene should flow naturally. If you're in a combat scene, it should flow to the next scene, which might be more combat, might be something else entirely. If you're in an investigation scene, the clues that you're looking for will lead you to that next scene. So, granted, there might be multiple choices for that, and that's when you're getting the off track I talked about, that they chose to go in an entirely different direction. But regardless, you're going to have subtle manipulations. It really should flow without you. You should have to do no actions to keep the scenes going properly. But things can occur that you may need to do these little subtle pushes in the correct direction. So that because the thing is, you're going to adapt your story appropriately. You're not going to break what you want to do. You're going to bend it to the needs of the players and the actions they do, the questions they say, and the directions they take within your scenes. So when we talk about role-playing games, they're story-driven, and they compare very well the way that their stories are told and a lot of the scenes roll out like a movie. So you can almost think of like your gaming world like a movie. There are certain tools that are very movie-based tools you can use with your role-playing game to advance them in the proper way that you want to go. You can cut scenes. And this is very important, especially if you get players splitting up. Cutting between scenes is a way of drawing out dramatic tension and keeping players engaged even when they're maybe not involved in this exact scene. That's the point of it, is that maybe something dramatic happens or suspenseful happens in one area where the other people are checking things out, that when you can quickly jump to the other group and have their scene. And you can play it out going back and forth with these little dramatic points in times, which you don't want to force any of these. You want to try to naturally weave them in, that something happens. You never want to force a scene. You always want to weave it in naturally to what's going on. So you look at what the players are doing, and then you have that sort of like, they're about to be revealed some kind of piece of information. Bam, you cut it. Or they just found something. Bam, you cut it. Something like that. It doesn't have to be a threat. It just has to be like, oh, what did we find? Oh, what did we learn about? Oh, what's going on? Well, the lights go out all of a sudden. Something that, even if it means nothing, you can do it. This is especially, again, useful if, for whatever reason, your party splits up. It's a helpful way of engaging them. Now, this can be confusing to newer players, so you have to be careful with the ways you use it. You have to use it properly. Now, you can also use montages. The thing is, when you've got like a preparation scene where you're going from point A to point B, where the players are prepping, and it's pretty cut and dry, you, of course, could just describe it in all the words of like, we go here, do this, do that, we're there. But you could also describe each scene as a little montage, effectively engaging them in what it does. Its own little description of a scene. You know, you could be like, while you're there, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then we cut to this happened, this happened, this happened. This happened, this happened, this happens. You engage them each a little more to make it that your narrative expands a little bit, just to make it more engaging to your players. Because the point is to keep your engagement up during these times which might draw away from this engagement. In the same retrospect, maybe you want to use teasers. You just basically have a little scene or have something at the beginning of a session setting up information. Granted, this teaser information should relate to what's going to happen in the session, and it should perhaps give hints or some kind of opening to what is going to occur, but you don't give full information. Your players don't even have to act on what you talked about in the teaser. Basically, you should set things up for the session at the beginning of it, establishing the tone of what's going to be happening. This works in both adventures or just single sessions too. In adventures, it's probably a little bit more important that you have like a background setup of information. That could be as good as narrating some kind of history or giving some kind of information players might have. That's the setup you're doing. Now, ending game sessions, on the other hand, is also an important thing you're going to have to do. A lot of times you're going to have more than one session to resolve the full adventure you want to do, or a campaign. When you end it, you want to keep the excitement level up for next time. You want to leave it at a point in time that is more suspenseful, opening it up, sort of like with the jump cuts. You're leaving it at a point in time that leaves players wanting for more, to dive back in the next session. They're ready for it. But don't be forceful of this. You don't want to do. You're not going to force any scenes, and don't be like, I have to have that, because you don't want suspense gained in losing the story. You want to keep the story going. It will also be important that once you've sort of ended that session, regardless of the type of ending you do, whether you did add in that suspense or it was just not natural for whatever you were doing, it might not have been natural to establish, oh, something suspenseful is occurring. It can happen in a session. You do still want to engage your players. Talk about them with a bit. See what they liked, maybe disliked about the session. And the fact is you can use that to bring it back in your next session to engage them more, to maybe make little alterations in the ways you were doing things, or add in little things that can help engage them the next time. Maybe interactions with one of the NPCs was terrible, boring, or something like that. You could draw that NPC away. You could have something happen to them. You could alter them in a little bit the way that their story is being let out to engage the players more. Up to you, but you're using this information of what happened at the end of the session and basically just disengaging, maybe having a little chat with your players to set that up. So that's it for today. I talked more about game mastering. I, of course, talked about the scene and engaging your players in the scene a little bit better. I talked about, the transitions between it, questions, answers, ways that they're going to interact with it, that the fact is every scene is played out with a number of questions that you're going to answer, whether or not it's combat, investigation, or whatever, and it's supposed to transition from one scene to a next. And then I talked about comparing role-playing games to movies, including using a number of cinematic tools to enhance your games. And of course, I moved in to talk about what you do at the end of a session in order to open yourself up to the next session. Make yourself ready and engage your players that they're going to be ready and exciting to play in it. In the next episode, I'll talk about atmosphere your characters are going to engage in, and of course the styles of play you're going to use. Two important factors, part of your adventure. So if you have questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It should support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.